In today's economy, upward mobility can be a challenge, especially for those who grow up in lower income families. But new research shows there are pathways to good jobs and a brighter future, although some pathways are more promising than others. From Capital News, Illinois, I'm Peter Hancock, and this is Capital Cast. Hello and welcome to Capital Cast, a regular podcast of Capital News, Illinois. Back in July, we did an episode that focused on upward mobility. It featured a report from the Illinois Workforce and Education Research Collaborative, or iWork, and that report revealed a troubling trend. As a general rule, young people who grow up in lower income families tend to earn less as adults than their upper income classmates, even when they go on to get similar training and education and go to work in similar fields. Toward the end of that podcast, I asked the question, how does someone break the cycle? How does someone born into a disadvantaged setting climb out of the hole and achieve the American dream? And the answer at that time was, that would be the focus of part 2 of the study. Well, now part 2 of the study is out, and that's what we're going to talk about today. My guest this week is Meg Bates. She's a researcher and director of iWork, which is based at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, and she's the lead author of the latest report, Promising Pathways, College and Industry Routes to Good Jobs for Illinois Youth from Low-Income Families. Meg, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so picking up where I left off 6 months ago with your colleague Sarah Cashdollar, are there pathways, especially here in Illinois, that can take a young adult from a low-income background to a more prosperous adult life?
Yes, there absolutely are. So what we found in this newest report, we looked at pathways that lead students who come from lower income backgrounds into higher earning brackets. And what we saw, first of all, is that the college degree, specifically the bachelor's degree, leads 80% of those students into a good job or into those higher brackets. There are other pathways as well that don't require the bachelor's degree, but the bachelor's degree is the predominant method that we saw, or the most sure bet. But there were other pathways like those in industries such as construction, manufacturing, and wholesale trade, as well as healthcare that could provide pathways into good work for those students.
Okay, and so first of all, how do we define a good job? Like if my kid is about to get out of high school, I want him to go on to get a good job. How do you tell the difference between what is a good job and what's like kind of a dead end job that's not really going to lead anywhere?
Yes, that's a great question. So a lot of researchers and policy groups have looked at this and spent some time defining a good job. Obviously, a key element is what you get paid, your wage. There are also things like benefits, like your health care, paid leave and time off, retirement. And then there are working conditions, safety, sense of belonging, sense of input into the workplace. All of those things contribute to what makes a good job. But what research has found is that wage really predicts whether those other elements will be present. So if you have a higher wage, you tend to also have some of those other things. And if you have a lower wage, you tend not to have those things. So researchers in general use wages as a way to measure a good job.
Okay, so it sounds like one of the basic findings is that a 4-year college degree or just some sort of college degree is still your best education buy. That in terms of bang for your buck, that's going to get you the best results.
That's absolutely right. So we had about 4 in 5 of our students from low-income backgrounds in our study went on, if they had a bachelor's degree, about 4 in 5 went on to be in a good job. But we also saw that about 52% of students with the associate's degree went on to be in a good job. It really went down from there, with about 19% of those with only a high school degree in a good job. So education still really matters.
Okay. So in places where education policy is being made at the State House and at the State Board of Education, even in local school boards, we hear about alternative pathways under the idea that not everyone is cut out to go to a four-year college. We certainly know with the rising cost of higher education, not everyone can afford to go to U of I or to Northwestern or DePaul or even SIU. So there's a lot of focus now on helping students achieve other kinds of degrees like industry certificates. You mentioned the construction trades and healthcare, a lot of other different kinds of fields that don't require a college degree, but do require some sort of post-secondary, maybe technical training. What are the most promising of those fields? And do those programs actually offer the same sort of pathway to a middle-class life that you can get from a college degree?
Yeah, so we did find, as I mentioned previously, we did find specific sub-baccalaureate programs and industries that did provide students with good jobs at a high rate. Construction, manufacturing, wholesale trade are three of those industries. There were also specific programs in healthcare and agriculture, et cetera, that really do work. What we tended to find in our data was that, first of all, mostly men were successful in those fields, particularly white and Latino men were successful in those fields, maybe simply because they go into them more than women and people and other people of color. But we also saw some disparities as well, that, even with a healthy number of women and men in these roles, that there were disparities in whether they were good jobs. So I would say, as an answer to that, there are some pathways that are working, and then others I would say maybe not yet. The evidence isn't there that they are working for everyone, but if we invest in making those pathways more equitable and getting more women and people of color in those pathways, they could be potential levers.
Well, and you talk about those disparities, and that's also addressed in the report, which seems kind of surprising now, especially like the gender-based disparities in the construction industry. Construction, historically, at least when I was growing up, was very much a male-dominated field. But if you look around at construction sites now, you do see more women working in the construction fields. But it sounds from what the data is telling you that it's not really as clear of a pathway for women as it is for men. Sort of wondering, how do you explain that? Or can we explain that?
Yeah, I think, we don't know for sure, but when we look at the data, I think there's kind of two explanations. One is that we just simply don't have enough women yet in those professions to, really develop their wages and calculus there. We just may not have enough of what we would call an insights in research to see the payoff. So it's possible that a very, positive practice that high school counselors and teachers could do is helping more young women access those pathways that appear to be successful for men. The more women that come in, those data may change. Another theory that folks have is that, we know from a lot of literature that if you have friends and family that have been in a particular job pathway before, that it gives you access to kind of knowledge and networking to succeed in it. And because we know these are fields that have historically been dominated by men, women may just not have those kinds of networks and capacity yet. And so building those on-ramps, building that knowledge and, capital for women could be an important way to make those more equitable.
So I guess one of the things that certainly caught my attention about this whole two-part project that you've done is that it really kind of cuts to the heart of the American dream. We're always told that America is a place where no matter what background you come from, if you work hard, you apply yourself, you can do anything you want. You can accomplish anything you want. And this report kind of says maybe that's a little more myth than reality, or maybe that's an aspirational attribute of America that we haven't quite achieved yet. And so I'm sort of wondering, I know iWork is a research based organization. You're not into politics and policy recommendations. But if you were to advise the legislature, or the State Board of Education or policymakers, what would you tell them we need to do in order to make the American dream more accessible to women and minorities and to people who are born into disadvantaged backgrounds?
Well, yeah, so first I'll say I think that you are right. Unfortunately, this research in Illinois is pretty similar to national research and research in other states, that where you start in life is just really too darn predictive of where you're going to end up. But I do think the other thing is that there are pathways to success. So if, coming out of this, I think of a few things. So one is that the most common pathway for the students in our study who came from low-income backgrounds is what we call some college, no degree. They enrolled in an associate or bachelor's degree program, but they didn't receive, the degree or certificate. And that is actually the most perilous position to be in, because you take on the cost or debt of earning a degree, but you don't get the payoff. And so when we see that many of these students, they did have college aspirations, they just didn't get through, I think that's the number one lever, is how do we make sure that those students who started off in college see it through? And that comes down to policy and support for colleges, to support first generation students, students from low income backgrounds, and so forth. I think another one is I don't want to discount the alternative pathways just because we're not seeing the data yet on these credential pathways that are sub-baccalaureate. I think there is promise in the ones that do work. And so a big exciting thing I think about these reports is that they're based on a tool that is, available to the public via the state, where parents and teachers and students can look at what are the pathways that are successful in Illinois for kids just like me, and can make more informed decisions about their post-high school steps. So I think better information about credential pathways, these, non-baccalaureate, could be very helpful to students from low-income backgrounds. So I think those are two clear investments right there that could help. And then, I do think that we're not misplaced in high schools in, helping more and more kids see themselves as college material, access college early through experiences like dual credit. I just think more kids could be going to and being successful in college. And so promoting that is not a bad idea for upward mobility.
Okay. Meg Bates, thank you very much. One last question. If someone wants to read this report, where can they most easily find it?
Yes, so it's on our website. And so if you Google iWork or Illinois Workforce and Education Research Collaborative, you'll come up with it quickly, but it's also dpi.illinois.edu/iWork.
Okay. We've been speaking with Meg Bates, Director of the Illinois Workforce and Education Research Collaborative, or iWork, at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, and you've been listening to Capital Cast. Capital Cast is a production of Capital News Illinois, a public affairs reporting project of the Illinois Press Foundation, with funding from the Robert R. McCormick Foundation. I want to thank our videographer, Andrew Campbell, for producing the video part of this podcast. You can find that on our YouTube page, along with other CNI video projects. Until next time, on behalf of the entire Capital News Illinois team, this is Peter Hancock saying thank you for listening.